One Night at Flumpty's, one of the most popular and recognizable FNAF fan games. It's considered one of the classics, up there with Pop Goes and Candies. I want to look back on each of the games in this franchise and see how they hold up, starting with Flumpty's 1 and ending with Flumpty's 3. You know what? I'll also rank them at the end, so stay tuned for that. Like and subscribe, and let's start. The first, One Night at Flumpty's. Now this is basically a reskin of FNAF 1, but there are differences, and I want to talk about them. I believe it's important to talk about the fun art style that it uses. Instead of having the classic pre-rendered click team look that a lot of other FNAF fan games had, you get beautifully drawn cartoony characters. It's a nice change of pace and I really like it. The environments look nice even though they are pretty bland. The character design is also really cool. I like that our enemies aren't robots, because, well, why would they be? Why limit yourself to robots if you can have eggs, beavers, and rectangle children? The characters are really unique. I think they look nice, and I like that some of them change to be really creepy, like Flumpty and Blam for example. It's taking advantage of the fact that, well, the world of Flumpty's has basically no rules. Flumpty himself says he's immune to the plot and can transcend time and space.
Hi, I'm Flumpty Bumpty. I'm an egg. I'm immune to the plot and I can transcend time and space. Also, I'm coming after you. You can figure out the rest. Have fun.
Does any other FNAF fan game have that? Oh, and rest in peace people with Tripofobia. How about the gameplay? It's pretty similar to FNAF 1, like I said. You got doors to close, enemies to track, a foxy enemy that runs into your office. One of the most obvious changes is the addition of this guy, Grunkfus the Clown. When you reach 4 AM, each time you check your cameras, Grunkfus gets closer and closer to you, until eventually he kills you. What I like about this is that it really works with the fact that you only have door power. Your cameras don't take away your power, only the doors do. And things can get pretty tight with this power, especially at the end of hard-boiled mode. So it's best to conserve the power by checking all the characters through the cameras and not the lights. You can use the cameras to determine whether they are at the door instead of constantly checking the light. I really like this. Grunkfus and the cameras go really well together. You only have door power and that makes cameras more useful and that makes Grunkfus more dangerous. I also think that the game is quite difficult. You often don't have a lot of power left at the end, and your friendly gang of murderers aren't very patient at the door. I feel like Grunkfus was a really good addition that made the gameplay more interesting, along with the door power, which makes cameras really important in this game as they are the key to having enough power. The game is called One Night at Flumpty's. One. There is, well, was one night. However, there's a second one that's more challenging. The one night aspect improves the game in my opinion, because it tackles a problem some other fan games have, like for example the first Candies game. It's a fine game, it's very similar to FNAF 1 as well, just like Flumpty's 1. However, there are 6 nights of it. That makes the game pretty long, but the changes between the nights are very small. I like that in Flumpty's the game has one night, because you don't really need more. You already experience everything the game has to offer in the first one, so why drag it out? However, I do like that there is a more challenging mode for the players that are looking for that. Those players, including me. I feel like this game has aged pretty well. Sure, it has some bland environments and it's similar to FNAF 1, but it has a nice art style and the changes the game has compared to FNAF 1 are good ones. It's a nice short game. However, let's see if the sequel is better or worse. So far, Flumpty's 1 is the best one in the series. And the worst one. It's also the worst smelling one. One Night at Flumpty's 2. This game had the debut of the hard-boiled mode. The harder difficulty was added in Flumpty's 1 as part of an update that had to be done to be able to sell the game on mobile and consoles, removing the copyright infringement, and the hard-boiled mode was added as a little bonus. However, it's a shame we don't get piglets, exposed organs anymore. Anyway, Flumpty's 2 is a lot more unique. It features original gameplay. You have this light switch. If it's on, your cameras charge. However, enemies can see you and raise your exposure meter. If the exposure meter is full, you die. With the light off, your enemies cannot see you, and they will eventually leave. There is the owl which flies through one of these two vents, and the red man who has the brutal mechanic of clicking one button occasionally. It's worth noting that most of the enemies begin to raise your exposure meter instantly. so you cannot just react when they get into your room. Also, the ISO returns. Returns? Yes, he returns. He was technically in the first game too. Just look at this pair of eyeballs. I really like this art style in this game as well, and I feel like the environments look better. The whole place looks more lively, and even though the game isn't that scary, I feel like it makes up for it by its nice, drawn, cartoony, unique style. It's very charming. I really like the gameplay of this game. The game forces you to check the cameras constantly, and you need to manage your time on cameras because they drain quickly. The game forces the player to pay attention. The player needs to learn movement patterns of characters like Eyesore and Blam. The player also needs to pay attention to Grunkfuss's timer and when the owl leaves the urinal. Flumpty is a special case. He can come into your office from anywhere on the cameras. However, he plays peekaboo with you and gives you a little time to react and turn off the lights when he arrives. I like this. It tests the reaction time of the player. I really like the gameplay loop here. Honestly, I don't have much complaints other than, well, Redman is a pushover. He is not red at all. Although Flumpty's 2 does not have a lot of strategy, like Flumpty's 1 had with the power for example, I feel like Flumpty's 2 makes up for that because of just how many things you need to keep track of. And it also has a small camera power meter. It is very easy to get overwhelmed by your enemies and lose track of them, which leads to chaos as you don't know when they will enter. There's a lot that can go wrong and you need to learn how to predict when your enemies will arrive. Once again, I also like that it's only one night, and the hard-boiled mode. I feel like dragging Flumpty's 2 over 6 nights would just make the entire experience worse. One night is good enough, along with a second one for those who want it. No need to drag out the game if it's unnecessary. This game is also quite short, and I feel like that's for the better. It's short and sweet. A nice charming game that gets very chaotic and will have you feeling very satisfied when you finally reach the end. How does it compare to Flumpty's 1? Well, I think it looks better, it's a lot more charming. Even though I think it's less scary, the gameplay is more original and I'd say much better. It's a very chaotic game that is easy to learn but hard to master. There's a lot the player has to worry about and that leads to a lot of mistakes. So I'd say that Flumpty's 2 is an improvement over the first one. The primary reason being that, well, it has really good gameplay and Flumpty's 1 was just a tweaked reskin of FNAF 1. But now, we have the final game of the franchise, One Night at Flumpty's 3. Is it the best one? There is only one way to find out. One Night at Flumpty's 3 released as part of the Fazbear franchise initiative. Let's first talk about the normal night, and then later the, well, special night. The game is set in this ice place, at least your office is. The cameras have very interesting backgrounds. Where and what is this place? Is this like Flumpty's house? I don't know. It's weird, but the basic premise is that you have this camera. You can flash this hallway and this vent. You slowly get cold because you're sitting in an ice room, so you need to go to the furnace to heat yourself up. Blam and Grunkfuss use this hallway. Flash Blam, do not flash Grunkfuss. The Radman is in this camera and will get closer to this hole. He will eventually enter your furnace. When he does, make sure to not be there and don't go there, or else he will climb out and kill you. There is also the beaver and owl hybrid, the beav-owl. They will come to you through the vent. You have to flash them. The eyesore will appear in this hallway. Flash him twice to make him disappear. The last enemy is Golden Flumpty. Glumpty? Whatever his name is. If you see him on the camera, make sure not to put it down, or else he will jump scare you and drain your heat. I guess he pours cold water on you or something. This game looks really good, even better than the second one. I really like the atmosphere and all the poses the characters make are really cartoony, and I feel like they fit the style of the game. Just like the second game, this one is also really stressful. There's a lot to talk about here, so I'm just gonna start with this furnace mechanic. Some of you may call me a hypocrite, because I hate the music box in FNAF 2, but I like this furnace mechanic. Well, what I like about this is the red man. You have to really manage this and make sure to time when you raise your temperature right, or else you're not going to be able to because of the red man. If you have all of these guys to worry about, then having to worry about this guy and having to manage those little breaks in between when the rest of the gang attacks you and when the redman shows up, it forces the player to strategize on when to raise their temperature, because if you don't do it well enough, the redman will mess up your entire night. You do not want to have low temperature while Redman is close. It also forces the player to take risks, having to check the temperature when the other characters are really close to being in the office. I love this mechanic. It's much better than the music box, because the music box is just putting the camera up and clicking the button. While glad you improved from the second game, Redman. I also really like Grunkfuzz's mechanic, because it works really well with Blam and the Eyesore. Sometimes if you flash them and get unlucky, Grunkfuzz will be right there, and he will kill you. This isn't that uncommon, but it's not a guaranteed death sentence. This mechanic forces the player to track Blam and Grunkfuzz, because if they don't, then the player will die. For example, make sure that Grunkfuzz is gone before they flash Blam. This is difficult, because if you spend too much time, then Blam will kill you. Also, make sure to flash Blam before Grunkfuzz gets in. All these mechanics force the player to check the cameras and make sure to not close them when Golden Flumpty is there. Grunkfuzz forces the player to actually pay attention to the hallway and who's there, and not just, oh, someone went in, I'm just gonna flash the light. There's a lot the player has to keep track of. Gotta make sure the B-Vowel isn't there, gotta make sure Grunkfuzz isn't there, along with Blam. Gotta constantly think and manage the temperature to make sure that the Redman doesn't catch you at a bad time. And gotta make sure to check for Eyesore and Golden Flumpty. You also have a limited amount of flashes. However, if you use them right, then that isn't that big of an issue. Overall, the game is just a lot. It's hard to keep track of everything, and I really like that. I like that you have to strategize, and that you need to use the limited amount of time you have correctly. However, this isn't all the game has to offer. Flumpty does not appear in this night. Only his golden cousin, who isn't even golden, just smashed. Well, that's because Flumpty appears in the appropriately named Flumpty Night. There is a lot to unpack here. Everyone is Flumpty. The rest of the gang have been brutally murdered by this egg. All the mechanics in the first night are also here, but the characters are replaced. For example, we have Spider Flumpty, Skull Flumpty, Sewn Shut Flumpty, just a lot of Flumpty. I think you get the idea. You have two doors that you need to shut in order to prevent one of the Flumpties from entering. These doors have power, so you need to make sure to not overuse them. Also, from time to time, these rooms swap, so you have to pay attention to that. The exposure meter also makes a comeback because one of the Flumpties has Grunkfuzz's mechanic from Flumpty's 2, where there is a timer and you need to flash him when he enters the room to make sure he doesn't raise your exposure meter too much. Redman's mechanic from Flumpty's 2 also returns. You need to make sure to cancel the download. What is Flumpty downloading? I have no idea. Also, Grunkfuzz's mechanic from the first game also returns. You need to make sure not to use your camera too much, or this Flumpty will kill you. Eventually, 2 new rooms get added where a Flumpty will appear and he will try to deactivate your door power, so you have to make sure to close this laser door so he doesn't do that. Also, that I mentioned that occasionally the game will glitch and it won't tell you how much temperature you have, what time it is, your power, your exposure meter, and your amount of camera clicks you have. There's a massive amount of mechanics that get introduced throughout this Flumpty night. Most of them are returning mechanics from Flumpty's 1 and 2. However, there are even some from the cancelled Wicked Flumpty's game, and I absolutely love it. This night is just so chaotic. Entire new mechanics and enemies are added throughout the night, and it's really difficult to keep track of everything. Thankfully, there's no Flumpty that gets mad when you flash him. All the renders are really cool. The game gets so chaotic, but it's semi-manageable sometimes if you're lucky. This night really tests the player on if they can keep track of so many things, and if they can manage their resources well. Beating this night is so satisfying, and you get rewarded. Near the end of the night, there's a song that plays. I guess Flumpty himself decides to sing to you while trying to kill you. I'm gonna be honest, this song is pretty groovy and funny. I never expected this when I first played the game. Everything works really well together in this night. It throws a lot at you and it's very satisfying to deal with all of it. This is an absolutely perfect end to the Flumpty's franchise. The gameplay is really tight. You need to focus on everything. It's really easy to get lost and forget about something, which would lead to death. This game also has a hard-boiled mode. If you beat it, you finally escape the yolky grasp of Flumpty. So, all 3 of these games, where do they rank? The worst one, Flumpty's 1. This is still a good game, but it's less original than the others, and I feel like the others have better art. I still recommend checking it out, and I feel like it's scarier than the rest. Maybe except Flumpty Night. In the second spot, Flumpty's 2. Much more original and really good. Short, but I really like the gameplay and I think it's a fine length for what it is. The best one is Flumpty's 3. Flumpty's 2 is awesome, but this one just goes that extra step. The addition of Flumpty Night alone makes it better. It was an absolutely fantastic final game, and I feel like it has more strategy than Flumpty's 2. I really like all of these games, however I think the third one is the best one. Every new addition got better. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this classic FNAF fan game franchise with me. Like and subscribe. I enjoyed these games a lot. Links to the GameJolt pages where you can download them are in the description. Let me know if you want to see more of these types of videos. I really enjoyed making it. Thank you for watching. This was GameSpeaking, and goodbye.